Let me turn to the topic of what Kamala Harris is doing this coming week, particularly Monday and Tuesday. She's got several events courting black voters. I know that you are talking about the black vote coming out, particularly black men, for Donald Trump. You're trying to help him along with that. To that point, can you talk specifically about what Donald Trump would do policy-wise in a second term to help black Americans?
Sure, and thank you for that question. What Donald Trump is going to do is going to be actually quite similar to what he did in his first term. When you lower tax rates, when you cut these reckless and crazy policies that are now in the Kamala Harris administration, and you cut those regulations down, what it does is it frees up the ability for businesses to thrive, for people to be able to earn more money, for them to be able to keep more money in their pockets. All of his economic policies actually have a stabilizing effect on prices, and they grow our economy. You couple that with his energy policies. He calls it drill, baby, drill, but what it is being energy dominant in the United States of America. That also allows for us to put a cap on these massive price increases under the Kamala Harris administration. What that means in particular for black families is that you have an ability to earn more money, keep more money, wages actually growing when you adjust them for inflation. And then the big stat, and this happened during the first Trump administration, nobody likes to talk about it. I heard Senator Warnock mention it. Wages adjusted for inflation were massively up under Donald Trump for black men, for black families, but for all Americans. The wage gap that Democrats love to lecture about, the wage gap in 2019 was actually shrinking under Donald Trump's administration, his economic policies, his energy policies, and his regulatory policies.
Can I just go back to the tax?
So that's the agenda that black men are looking at.
Okay, thank you for that. The tax cut question.
Say again, go ahead.
I would imagine that Kamala Harris would say, or would ask the question about how tax cuts for wealthy Americans will help the black community. What's the answer to that?
Well, Kamala Harris would say something like that, but we know that she's wrong because economically she's been wrong for the last 1,400 days. If you look at Tax Cut and Jobs Act, it cut tax rates across the board, mostly for middle-class families. So this is why wages adjusted for inflation for black families was higher under Donald Trump than any other administration in the history of our country. That is a record of economic success.
Let me just quickly play for you what former President Obama said exactly on this question of the economy a couple of days ago.
Yeah, it was pretty good because it was my economy. It wasn't something he did. I had spent 8 years cleaning up the mess that the Republicans had left me the last time. He didn't do nothing except those big tax cuts.
How do you respond to that?
Very easily. I was working in finance during Barack Obama's administration. Let me tell you, the economy under his especially the last 5 years, was growing at about 1 to 1.5% per year. I think at the time, President Obama was saying that, this era of large economic growth is something of the past. We're going to have a more consistent economy. Well, in his words, a consistent economy meant one that barely grew. So when Donald Trump came in, he brought his tax cut policy in, which cut taxes across the board for everybody in our country. Couple the fact that he did cut massive regulations from the Obama administration. And what did we see? Economic growth in the United States went from 1.5% under Barack Obama to 3.5% under Donald Trump. Wages adjusted for inflation, like I said, because it's the truth, increased for every subgroup of Americans in our country. The wealth gap was closing. We were actually booming economically far more than we did under Barack Obama. So that's a cool statement he made on the stump.